Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Brian Schiff, flight instructor and airline captain. Welcome to the 12th episode of the SCHIFF Show. This episode celebrates our completion of 1 year of this program, and we couldn't be more pleased with its success and all of the positive feedback that we've received. Tonight will be a fun episode, a great program. We'll have a special guest, John Niehaus. We'll be discussing the 2017 crash of a Learjet in Teterboro and the topics of pre-flight preparation, stabilized approach concept, and fatigue risk management, and upset recovery and prevention training. And of course, at the end, we'll discuss my 2 speeds concept in a little bit more detail. But before we get started, let's take care of some administrative items, as we usually do, just in case we have any new viewers. We are getting new ones every month. The SCHIFF Show is made possible by our sponsor, Avemco. And every time I shop for insurance, I land on Avemco because there are reasonable premiums, a lot of insurance options, and their commitment and unwavering support for aviation safety. They support a lot of educators like myself and others who are really just giving back to industry and trying to make aviation safer. That's in their best interest. It's in your best interest. And that's what I'm trying to do. And but we all know every now and then SCHIFF happens. And when it does, Avemco is there to help you and make something that could have been a lot disastrous at a stressful time a lot easier. I've had to use them at a stressful time. Luckily, it was nothing drastic, but they certainly can help you navigate through a tough time. Call them for a quick quote and visit their website by using the link on our program website or on any of my emails to you. And don't forget to tell them you're a listener of the SCHIFF Show and save 5%. Next year, we got some really exciting changes coming. Stay tuned till the end of this episode to hear about those changes for next year and changes that will help you become a better and safer pilot and how you can use the SCHIFF Show to complete your flight reviews. 2025 has been a great year. Thank you for all of your support, and special thank you once again to Avemco for supporting this program and helping to make it a higher quality program and to help make it free to you. The episode tonight is obviously eligible for Wings credit, and the Wings program makes your piloting and proficiency into measurable safety. Complete 3 knowledge courses and 3 flight activities annually, and you'll satisfy the requirements for a flight review while reducing your risk of getting into an accident. Plus, Avemco offers discounts for Wings participants. The FAA also gives accident forgiveness when they see that you're active in the Wings program. I've had a runway incursion. My first runway incursion was at about 15,000 hours into my flying career, and it can happen to anybody. And when it does, they look back at my record with the FAA safety team and they said, "We see you're very active in giving and taking courses, so we're going to just have you make a course on runway incursions and we'll forgive you." But by being here today, you're investing in your skills and your safety, and I want to thank you for your commitment to ongoing learning in aviation. If you'd like detailed information about the Wings program and you're new to it, we have the Wings Pilot Proficiency Program User's Guide in the course resources section of the main page of this program. The course resources page also contains a trove of valuable resources. I've added many of the slides you'll see today. We started doing that actually with this episode, where a lot of the slides you're probably going to want to take pictures of, screenshots, or want to see again. You could probably see them in the course resources where you can download them and keep them for yourself. So you don't have to try to get screenshots or take pictures or write frantically. Just visit the course resources page and download to your heart's content. There's also a lot of the investigation data for this accident, and a lot of the topics, more educational content for the topics that we'll be talking about tonight. To receive Wings credit for this course, just click on the Earn Wings credit button on this page and sign into your FAA Safety Team account and take the quiz. However, important note, after our show, the FAA Safety Team website tends to slow down, so I recommend waiting until later tonight or even tomorrow to take the quiz and get your Wings credit. The quiz is not that hard, trust me. You'll be able to remember what you saw on this program and be able to take that quiz tomorrow without any problems. The key points are that the Wings program, it satisfies a flight review. It satisfies, you get accident prevention focus, because the topics that are actually approved by the FAA are statistically looked at by the FAA and approved because these are the accident topics. These are the top causes of aircraft accidents. So they approve, and we try to cater to those topics that specifically are going to reduce accidents and help aviation safety. On the main page for each course on the schiffshow.tv webpage, you'll find, in addition to all the archives, the course resources page, the Wings user guide, and all kinds of documents in there that I mentioned. And then in the bottom right corner, you'll see the chat bubble. So you can click on that to join the chat and participate in tonight's conversation. Just bear in mind that's in real time, and this program, actually, if you started late, you can be watching it behind real time, and you could be watching it tomorrow outside of real time. And trust me, there probably won't be anybody on the chat tomorrow. After clicking the chat bubble, you'll see a pop-up window. Enter your name, post your comment or question, participate in the polls, but you must be watching in real time to participate in the polls. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome tonight's guest. Tonight, I'm excited to welcome my good friend, John Niehaus. John holds a Bachelor of Science in Aviation Flight Science and Administration from Western Michigan University. He holds an ATP with multiple type ratings, including the Gulfstream G7. I didn't even know they got that high on the Gulfstreams. I think the last one I flew was 5. His experience spans flight instruction, airline corporate crew operations, and training captain roles. He led programs and innovation at NAFI, where I know him and met him and worked alongside. I can tell you he's one hell of a guy and has offered quite a bit of great program stuff. You should check that out. John now flies globally for a Fortune 500 corporate flight department and continues to mentor future aviation professionals. Most recently, he launched the Calm Cockpit podcast, bringing well-being and mental training techniques to the forefront of aviation safety. Welcome, John. It's awesome to have you on the show.
I'm so excited to be here, and to be on the last one of the year for your first year is really exciting.
Yeah, happy holidays. And so when we complete this one, we'll have a raise a glass and celebrate having completed the first year. And next year, once again, we'll kick off some cool stuff. So tell me a little bit more about this podcast that you're doing. And I know that you've asked me to be a guest on it. And we really got to coordinate some time to get on that thing.
We do. And you would be a great guest, I'm sure. And I'm excited for that. We also started the podcast at the beginning of the year. So December is kind of the culmination of our year. I say we because I do have a co-founder of the Calm Cockpit, Keita Brown. And basically the idea kind of sprang from the thought that, more than I do, and this career is stressful. Things happen, anxieties, stress, training, life, all of what happens to us. And the thought is that how do we manage that? In aviation, so often we don't talk about these things, and that ends up kind of allowing them to bubble up to the surface. And I got to thinking about it, and the more we talk, the more we realize that we can manage these things, the better our performance can become. So think of it sort of as an idea of increasing your mental performance to make you a better pilot, to make you more successful, more safe, but then at the same time, sort of managing some of those day-to-day things that we all think about.
I think that's fantastic. And as you know, that's a topic near and dear to my heart. My dad calls it the soft stuff, how a wing, produces lift, how to fly the airplane, all this mechanical stuff that we learn. This soft stuff is kind of hard to learn, yet it's a huge factor. And your programs really touch on a lot of important topics. I've listened to several. In fact, your first guest is going to be our next guest here on the Schiff Show. So we'll talk about that at the end when we introduce her. But I'm really looking forward to watching the rest of your programs. I encourage everybody to check that out. I think that will help make you a safer pilot. If there's anything that you stress about when you go flying, and we all do that to some degree. If you don't stress at all, you're probably not considering some factors you should be. Right?
I like to think about the idea of seeing Brian with his hat and his airline uniform walking through the terminal of Dallas, and a young pilot or a new pilot looking at him and going, boy, I really would love to be that someday, and assuming that you've got all your shift together. And we all know that sometimes the calm, cool, and collected, we've just learned to hide it a little bit better sometimes. And
you're absolutely right.
So some of these newer pilots don't realize that no matter how far into your career you progress, you're still managing some of those stresses and anxieties. You've just gotten better at it, and you've gotten better at maybe not showing it. So our philosophy is, if we can kind of be honest about some of that stuff and show people that even successful pilots have some of those same things, that maybe it helps the next guy or girl, progress a little bit faster.
Well, I love that. That's so true. And I guarantee you they're not thinking I want to be that guy when they see me in the terminal. That said, you're right. If I don't look nervous right now or stressed out, then I'm actually doing a pretty good job faking it then, aren't I?
Mm-hmm.
So, no, I think it's fantastic. I look forward to hearing more of those, and you can tell us more about that at the end of tonight's program. But without wasting more time, let's get into it. Again, during every episode, we look at these. We have these 5 topics, basically. We'll look at an accident. We'll look at the procedures, training, and technology that can go along with helping you become a pilot who will not get into that kind of an accident, to help you avoid that kind of an accident. Then at the end, for fun, we'll have a game show and a trivia quiz, which we'll do today as well. And it may or may not have something to do with the topic. It doesn't necessarily have to. So let's get to it tonight. We're going to look at an accident. Again, this is an accident involving a Learjet that happened. It happened on May 15th of 2017. The 2 pilots on board, the captain and co-pilot, they were properly rated and had plenty of experience, as you can see, albeit not a whole lot of time in the actual Learjet or operating in and out of Teterboro. The co-pilot was considered an SIC 0, which is a designation by the company that means he can only serve as a pilot monitoring. He can do the radios, put the gear up, do checklists. He's not supposed to fly the airplane unless he's with a check pilot. And this just means that he's too new or still needs some more training. But for whatever reason, he's not supposed to be flying the airplane. And on this accident flight, he was flying the airplane. So again, this goes along with one of the pieces of advice that I like to give. Stay inside the envelope. Follow the rules. They're there for a reason. And they went outside the envelope when they let the co-pilot fly this airplane. And I understand why they did it. I mean, at your flight operation, John, do you guys ever let pilots fly when you have a restriction on anybody not flying?
In our operations, no, we don't. In the company that I used to work for, which was a 135 company, you either kind of were rated or you weren't. And so we tried to type every SIC with a PIC type if we could. But if they had an SIC type, then we made sure that they stayed within the reins of what they were appropriately allowed to do.
Right. So good pilot in command. And for UGA pilots, instructors, there's a right and wrong time to let your students fly. And if you're thinking maybe I shouldn't, you're probably right. Well, let's take a look at this. This was an NTSB animation and is available for you to watch. I've got a link for it in the course resources. It's also in the NTSB docket. I've condensed it a little bit, taken out some of it to save time, but let's go ahead and watch this, because why reinvent the wheel and have me try and explain it to you when they do a pretty good job right here.
On May 15, 2017, about 3:29 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, a Learjet 35A departed control flight while flying the ILS Runway 6 Circle to Land Runway 1 approach at the Teterboro Airport. The Part 91 positioning flight departed the Philadelphia International Airport, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, bound for Teterboro about 3:04 p.m. The straight line distance from Philadelphia to Teterboro was about 80 nautical miles, and the flight lasted about 25 minutes. The flight to Teterboro was the crew's third and last planned trip for the day.
452 Delta Alpha, any chance engine higher?
452 Delta Alpha, unable higher. I would have to spin you back around and sequence you with the rest of the traffic going into Teterboro.
About 2 minutes later, when the airplane was about 48 nautical miles from the Teterboro Airport, Air Traffic Control began vectoring the airplane for the ILS Runway 6 Circle to Runway 1 approach to the Teterboro Airport.
Clear 452 Delta Alpha, New York approach, New York altimeter 2975, flighting 020, vector ILS 6, circle 1.
Okay, we got 299 what was that again? Say that again for 452 Delta Alpha.
The altimeter is 2975 at Newark. Clear 2 Delta Alpha, flighting 020, vector ILS 6, circle 1.
Okay, 020, 452 Delta Alpha.
The cockpit voice recording indicated that the captain questioned the reason for the vectors and assigned approach, because he told the second command that they were still hundreds of miles away. About 26 seconds later, air traffic control gave a descent clearance.
Clear 2 Delta Alpha, descend and maintain 3000.
3000, 2 Delta Alpha.
After acknowledging that clearance, the captain realized that they were close to Teterboro and stated that they would be at Teterboro in 10 minutes.
Clear 2 Delta Alpha, flighting at 090, intercept the 6 localizer, contact New York approach 127.6.
Okay, 127.6, fly heading 090 to intercept the 6 and the Teterboro, 452 Delta Alpha.
While attempting to join the localizer, the second in command mistook the Newark International Airport for Teterboro and told the captain that he had the runway in sight. The airplane flew through the localizer course of 060 degrees, and shortly after, air traffic control stated the following.
Learjet 2 Delta Alpha, make sure you intercept the localizer.
452 Delta Alpha, copy.
Learjet 2 Delta Alpha, left turn 20, heading for needed to join.
We got it, 452 Delta Alpha.
The airplane turned left and intercepted the localizer inbound. Air traffic control then directed the flight to the waypoint Vings.
Learjet 2 Delta Alpha, just go to, can you go to Vings? Can you do that? Vings, intercept localizer 6.
452 Delta Alpha, copy.
While the airplane was inbound to Vings, the second in command attempted to transfer the controls to the captain, but the captain did not respond and the second in command continued to fly the approach.
Learjet 452 Delta Alpha is 8 miles from Vings, cross Vings at 2,000 feet, clear ILS runway 6, circle runway 1.
Okay, cleared ILS 6, circle 1, Vings 2000, 452 Delta Alpha.
The pilots did not conduct an approach briefing before beginning the approach, contrary to published guidance in company manuals. The captain stated to the second in command that they would be circling to runway 1 and would be descending to the circling minimums of 760 feet. The Teterboro Airport is located in either Newark, John F. Kennedy, and LaGuardia airports. To avoid conflicts with those airports, aircraft landing at Teterboro when the wind is from the north are often vectored to approach from the west, then circle to land to the north on runway 1. The white line shows the ground tracks of previous aircraft flying the same circling approach that was assigned to the accident airplane. On the day of the accident, the wind was from the northwest at 16 to 20 knots, gusting to 32 knots. The initial approach clearance issued to the airplane was to fly the ILS runway 6 circle to runway 1. Airplanes flying this approach were typically told to circle at Torby, which was 3.8 nautical miles from the approach end of runway 6. After Torby, they would turn right and visually fly toward MetLife Stadium, and then turn left to line up with runway 1. About 3 minutes after receiving the approach clearance, air traffic control instructed the flight to do 3 things. 1. Contact Teterboro Tower. 2. Cross Dandy at 1,500 feet. 3. Circle at Torby.
Learjet 2 Delta Alpha, contact Teterboro Tower 190.5. Shoot across Dandy, 1,500 feet, circle at Torby.
All right, Dandy, 200 feet, circle at Torby, 925, 452 Delta Alpha.
Dandy at 1,500 feet, 2 Delta Alpha.
2015, 452 Delta Alpha.
The flight crew acknowledged these instructions, but failed to do all 3. First, they did not contact the tower. Second, the airplane crossed Dandy at 2,000 feet instead of 1,500 feet. Third, they did not turn at Torby. As the airplane crossed Torby, the captain continued to instruct the second in command, improperly directing him to descend to the minimum descent altitude of 760 feet, while the airplane continued straight toward runway 6, instead of turning right at Torby and proceeding visually to the runway. 1.5 minutes later, the crew still had not switched to the tower radio frequency until told a second time by air traffic control.
Clear 452 Delta Alpha, Teterboro Tower.
Yeah, we're up for the circling 1, 2 Delta Alpha.
Roger, Lear 452 Delta Alpha, wind 36016, gust 32, runway 1, continue traffic holding in position.
452 Delta Alpha.
The airplane continued toward the airport as the captain instructed the second in command to stop the descent.
Lear 2 Delta Alpha, runway 1, clear to land, safe parking.
Yeah, we're going to be at Jet Aviation, 452 Delta Alpha, clear to land 1.
When the airplane was about 1 nautical miles from the end of runway 6, the tower questioned the crew about the turn.
He's landing 5 Delta Alpha, you can start that turn?
Yes, sir, we're doing it right now, 452 Delta Alpha.
While starting the turn to the right, the second in command told the captain, "Your flight controls," but the captain did not respond. The airplane lost 300 feet in the turn, and the enhanced ground proximity warning system sounded, 500 feet, and sink rate, pull up. The second in command asked the captain to take the flight controls again, and finally the captain took the controls, directed the second in command to watch the airspeed, and began a high bank left turn to runway 1. During the turn, the second in command called airspeed 4 times. The captain called out stall, as the second in command agreed and repeated airspeed twice. The enhanced ground proximity warning system sounded, sink rate, pull up. A security camera captured the airplane as it impacted the ground at a right bank angle of about 125 degrees.
It's really tough to watch. The NTSB did a good job of summarizing that. I assume as a corporate pilot, John, you've been into Teterboro a time or two?
Once or twice.
Yeah. Have you done that procedure, fly the ILS to 6, circle to land runway 1? ILS 1, circle 6.
I have, yeah. There's actually 2 main circling approaches that you can do into Teterboro, but the 1 circle to 6 is the primary one you usually see.
Yeah, I think you're 6 and then 1 and then circles. Well, and anyway, that was explained fairly well. What they didn't explain in there, and I'd like to caution everybody. First of all, it's great to study accidents. We do learn a lot from studying accidents. We want to know, what did they do wrong? Because I could do that same thing wrong. I want to learn from it. I don't want to do that wrong. This accident happened in 2017. Over 8 years ago. I would like to encourage everybody not to be, to lend too much credibility to. So the people who get on the internet right away, as I call them, the internet rapid response teams, right after an accident, they're doing that to get clicks because it's interesting, it's hot, the topic, the news is hot, but they don't always have all of the facts. A lot comes out afterwards. We learn a lot when the NTSB does its investigation. In this case, the docket, there's a link to it in the course resources and the links. And you can go look at it and realize there's a ton of information. You could read the cockpit voice recorder, and you can see a lot of things. Like I learned by an interview statement. Now the passengers on this that were on one of the previous legs, it told a lot, and you can get a lot from that. So they also learned about the itinerary of the pilots for the day. They started out in Teterboro, and they were supposed to fly to Bedford, Massachusetts from Peterborough and pick up 2 passengers. And so they fly there early morning, they wait, they pick up the 2 passengers, and then they're taking these 2 passengers from Bedford to Philadelphia. And then they were supposed to wait for those passengers. After spending 45 minutes at the FBO in Bedford, they departed with those passengers. It's like an 80-mile flight, not that long. But once they got there is what interesting happened. When they got there, later, the passengers were supposed to fly with the crew back to Teterboro on that accident flight, but later stated in an NTSB interview that they were so scared by the landing in Philadelphia that one of them said, "I don't want to fly on that airplane anymore." And they decided to drive back to Teterboro. Well, they got home and later that night saw this on the news, and they saw the plane crash, the aircraft they would have been on. And when they realized that getting off that airplane was the best decision of their lives.
Literally.
Literally. They exceeded many airspeed restrictions, the 250 knot speed limit below 10,000 feet. They exceeded that multiple times. There's a lot of things that I learned in there. You can look at the accident report and you can see they show the radar tracks from 56 airplanes that preceded them on this same procedure, flying the ILS 26, circle land runway 1. And you can kind of see everybody kind of breaks off at the same point, except 452 Delta Alpha. They did not. They went way past and they turned almost abeam the numbers on a like what would be a short approach. So there's a whole lot that they did wrong, and there's a lot we could cover. Even the transfer of flight controls, you saw in that video that was an issue. But tonight I'd like to focus in on these topics. Under the procedures section, we'll talk about pre-flight planning and stabilized approach. Under the techniques section, we'll talk about upset prevention recovery training and fatigue risk management. And again, my favorite topic, 2 speeds, because I think these pilots were certainly in a hurry. So that takes us to procedures. Now, the first one I wanted to talk about, again, this is what the stuff that's in the FARs. It's what is in the AIM, the publications the FAA gives us. It's in the books. It's in your handbooks. It's the procedures you're supposed to follow. And pre-flight planning certainly is one part of it. When you get to the airport to fly one of your trips, John, how early do you get there?
So generally for a domestic trip, we're at the airport about an hour and a half in advance. And that's assuming that you've already done the prep work that you needed to do, say, the night before. So, pre-flight, pre-flight starts the day before.
Exactly. And that was what I was going to get at. So you get there an hour and a half before the flight. Is that when you start thinking about the flight for the first time? No, you don't. No. I don't. I mean, I'm watching the weather the night before. I'm like, what am I going to have to be considering? And so, it starts really when you find out about you're doing that trip. So if you find out in advance, you have plenty of time to start thinking about what am I going to be doing? Where do I need to go? And we'll look at some under the technology section of tonight's show. We'll look at some of the resources that are available to do some of that research. Part 91 tells pilots that each pilot in command shall, before the beginning of flight, become familiar with all available information concerning that flight. We've quoted that FAR before on this program. Problem is, what information is available? A lot. Weather, NOTAMs, but looking at the airport, becoming familiar, looking at procedures, all of that. I mean, what are the kind of things that you consider? Like, you're going to Teterboro. What do you look at, John, when you're going there?
Well, so the first thing I'd like to point out just before we get to that discussion is, I spent 6 years in charter. I know the life of a charter pilot. And I also know that sometimes you walk in thinking you're going to do a certain 5 legs, and you get in the morning and all of that goes out the window and you get 5 legs to places you weren't expecting to go. So to give some credence to some pilots who say, well, there are times where I can't pre-flight the night before for some of these airports. I get it. I've been there. I've lived that life. However, I think the difference is that when that does happen, and let's say you have still an hour and a half to prep for a brand new day of flying, that hour and a half goes out the window. I can't tell you how many times with my old company, they would say, well, you are supposed to leave at this time. And my response was, I would be if I were doing the flight that you told me I was going to do. Now I'm going to adjust, but this takes time. I need to know what I'm getting into, because as this crew found out, if you don't know and you start learning when you get there, then bad things can happen. And of course, unfortunately for this crew, it did. Now, sort of to answer your question in terms of what I would look at going into Teterboro, I think there's a few different things there. I think that we're going to go over some of the different resources in terms of websites and things. But of course, 4Flight, as we all know, has just a treasure trove of information on airports. I'm looking at obviously the NOTAMs and the weather, of course. I'm looking at what kinds of approaches do they have? What kinds of runways do they favor? If there's a digital ATIS, I'm going to check that because it's going to show me some traffic flow. Maybe I'm not getting there till, a couple hours after I leave, but at least I know what are they doing now so that I can kind of anticipate what they might be doing. As a first officer for a company, I'm also going to be leaning a little bit heavily on the captain. Now, granted, yes, they're going to do the pre-flight planning, but my expectation is going into that flight, there's going to be some kind of brief. There is a little bit of this industry knowledge that gets passed on. If I'm a first officer, do I know that they're going to do an ILS 6 circle to 1? Maybe not. So there are places where you can find that information, but I'm also assuming in a charter or corporate company, New York, Teterboro being a very popular place to go, that there's some knowledge that captain's going to have of this is typical for this type of wind or this type of weather. And so we're going to expect to do this. And if you've never done that before, let's talk about it on the ground. I think any instructor can say that's briefing that on the ground is going to be your best bet.
Absolutely. So you as an experienced captain get one of those first officers who's relatively new and or never has been to Teterboro. That's how you're going to mitigate that fact that they've never been there. Is you're going to, I think you just said that you'll talk to them on the ground, you'll brief them what you're going to do so they can be ready for it. Mm-hmm. And look at the chart. I would have known beforehand because looking at resources, and we'll see it here later. I think it was in the map before. You see a stadium there. I would look at that and say that's a perfect place to aim for the base and kind of curve around. I would look at Google Earth. I look at everything and try to figure out what I'm going to have to do. And the reason they did that procedure there is, the winds were out of the northwest, and the preferred landing runway, and I think they said in the video, was runway 1 rather than runway 6, because they had a tailwind or strong crosswind, and you'd rather land into the wind on runway 1. Well, there's no ILS to runway 1 because there's no way to have an ILS to runway 1. It would interfere with LaGuardia, and all the other
New York
airspace.
airspace.
Yeah, all the other New York airports, the airspace and traffic and everything like that. So, in any event, that's one of the reasons that they don't have an approach to that runway. You've got to mitigate that. You've got to figure out what's going on. There's so much that studying ahead of time, and we'll look at the resources of where you can look to get that information. But the pilots, I think, who are crashing airplanes are the ones who just take for granted that they're going to get in the car and go. They're going to get in the plane and go. You're going to just plan on showing up and going without all that extra pre-flight and all that extra looking at things and the time spent getting familiar with as much as they can. So I think that's important, to spend as much time preparing and taking the extra time. You mentioned two things. One, I don't have enough time, so that kind of plays along with my 2 speeds. Time is a very important thing, and feeling rushed. And you mitigated that by saying, okay, we may not leave on time. I need to take the time to do it. And that's exactly what we'll talk about later. To mitigate that factor of being rushed, you've got to get those tasks accomplished. The other thing they didn't do in this is they didn't do a stabilized approach. Now, I know we at the airlines have a stabilized approach policy. This charter company had a stabilized approach policy. I've got it on these slides that basically the policy is that they'll be stabilized by 1,000 feet above the airport, unless that cannot happen due to abnormal conditions or a steep approach or tailwind or something. But then it should be briefed. The stabilized approach means on the vertical and lateral paths, you would be on path, on glide path. Only small pitch and heading changes required for the rest of the approach. And then within 10 knots of the target airspeed, as you briefed it. You might be at a higher speed because of gusts or something like that, but you want to brief that. And then the aircraft needs to be configured for landing well ahead of time, meaning gear and flaps are down. And usually there's an approach gate or some kind of point at which you're required to do that. At this company, they said 1,000 feet. Furthermore, the sink rate should not exceed 1,200 feet a minute unless required by the approach, and that again should be briefed. Power is set and drastic changes are not needed. The aircraft should be aligned with the runway and no less than 500 feet above the airport. All briefings and checklists should be complete by then. I would venture to wager that on this accident flight, this was not the case. And finally, the primary safety factor in requiring a stabilized approach is that if by that approach gate or that point, it's determined and defined by the operator at that point, 1,000 feet or 500 feet, the aircraft is believed to be unstable, meaning all the criteria I just listed are not met, then you go around. And there's a go around policy. Go arounds are not a bad thing. I think that's something that a lot of people think that's admitting failure by going around. But you guys have a stabilized approach policy at your company?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. It's very similar. I mean, we're expected to be fully configured and wings level, 1,000 feet for an instrument procedure, 500 feet for a visual procedure. And same, I wrote them down here. For an adjusted ref speed, we can be plus or minus 20 knots. Anything more than that is a required, basically abandon the approach. The descent, plus or minus 300 feet per minute of what your target is, and then no more than 1,000 feet per minute in the approach. And yeah, basically after that, it's go missed. And
yeah,
go ahead.
That sounds very similar to ours. And we also have a no-fault go-around policy where you're never going to be faulted for going around, ever. I think in this case with this Learjet, they were caught behind. They should have done a go-around well in advance and said, let's go back and try this again. But they were also disoriented. They weren't ready. I don't even think the pilot realized how short a flight it was, having filed for 24,000 feet and then requesting to go higher when it was such a short flight. But we also have, like, if this happened recently, if the co-pilot says go around, I have to go around. I don't have a choice. It's even if I'm PIC. Now, obviously, in the interest of safety, I could override that, if in the interest of safety, if I had to. But generally, if one of us says go around, it's mandatory. and that's our policy. So in general aviation, I think we should be teaching the same policy. If the obviously, if a student tells an instructor to go around, they don't really know the instruction. They might get a little scared. So you know when it's appropriate. But students are taught to go around whenever the instructor says go around, right? The stabilized approach concept has so much more than I can possibly show. But in the course resources are, the FAST team put together an FAA safety brief on stabilized approach. It's in the course resources. And also, the NTSB put out an alert, a safety alert on stabilized approaches and landings. So those are in the course resources. There's a lot more detail than we could cover in a 1-hour program, but it is something you can apply to general aviation. If you are flying your Bonanza cross country for a hamburger, and you can have a policy that, hey, by 600 feet, the gear and flaps better be down. It better be configured. By 500 feet, I better be on speed, and nothing really needs to be changed. If that's the case, then not the case, then go around. So establish your own policy for where you want to be. And one of the other great pieces of advice in here is it recommends the earlier you get on a 3-to-1 profile, meaning for every 1,000 feet you are above the airport, you should be 3 miles away. I should rephrase that. For every 3 miles away from the airport, you should be at about 1,000 feet. So if you're 9 miles, you'd want to be at 3,000 feet. So using that rule of thumb, it's a really good one for gauging where you should be relative to the airport. People get caught behind when they come in high. Very common with students. I'm sure you've seen it too. And I think when you have before you got all this technology in your Falcon, you probably had one of the challenges was to say, oh, you're told to cross a fix at certain, whatever, X thousand feet. Okay, when do I start down? And that's always a thing. And you hear so many rules of thumb. Everything I've heard, the 3-to-1 always seems to work.
It does.
Do you use that?
I used to. Yeah, I'm grateful for the technology to where I don't have to commit myself to mental math quite as much, just because I don't trust myself that well.
Yeah.
But a nice vertical descent too kind of spoils us. But yeah, I mean, depending on the airframe and the capability of the FMS, the 3-to-1 rule works beautifully.
Yeah, and I say take either if you have extra technology, and we all do these days. If your iPhone has ForeFlight and your iPad and the airplane has Garmin and everything's going on, you have all these sources. Take one of them and just put your destination on it. Just know your distance from here to your destination, present position to destination, and know that if you're cruising at 5,000 feet, then you know that you want to start down by, for every 1,000 feet is 3 miles. So 15 miles out, you want to leave 5,000 feet. That's just rough, just a rough idea of where you should be, and help your situation awareness that way. And that's one of the pieces of advice in the safety alert. That's what we've used. I've used it forever, since before I flew an airplane that would tell me when to start down. So
in this case, I think the stabilized approach call would have been kind of the last ditch effort to save these guys. I'm not going to sit here and bash other pilots. That's not why I'm here. At the same time, to your point, I think that they left their situational awareness in, Philadelphia, where they left, because there were calls. If you look at the documents, there were calls where I think it was the captain was saying, I don't know why they're giving us these instructions. We're still a couple 100 miles out. Well, last I checked, Philadelphia is not quite that far. And so, they were behind from the very beginning. And, you saw the graph of where they circled. They're supposed to basically circle at Torby, the final approach fix, which by my count is roughly about 4 miles from the end of runway 6. And they were, I think it was 2 miles. Or maybe even less than that inside the final approach fix before commencing the circle. So there's these things of like, okay, I don't know where I am well outside of the airport environment. I get to the airport. I miss the localizer. I don't know where I am in association to the approach itself. They were also high on the approach. So that is another thing. So now you've got this Swiss cheese model lining up. You've got an error chain of one thing snowballing into another, causing them to do the turn late. And I think we've all heard too many stories of people who overbank trying to make that runway because they didn't orient themselves correctly. And that stabilized approach would have been the final call for them to say, hey, we're done. But ego gets in the way sometimes, and we don't even know it. I mean, ego is kind of a nasty term because we don't really mean it. It's unintentional, but you get so fixated on, I'm going to get this in, I'm going to make this landing, I'm going to make it work.
Right. We're problem
And-
solvers. We want to solve the
Exactly.
problem. We want to make it work.
And next thing you know, you just pushed it a little bit too far. And all it would have taken is one of them to say, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. Let's go around and try again.
Yeah. And that's really tough to do. And remember from the video we saw, we know it was VFR. The visibility was good. They were looking at the runway. The picture that they must have seen had to have been pretty like, we've never seen this before, uncomfortable. And, I don't know, they may have been trying to go around or salvage or something, but they did stall, and it was exacerbated by a steep turn, or probably trying to get to that runway. And very unfortunate. I like to keep everything very easy for myself. If it starts getting difficult, that's a sign that I need to stop and take a look at something, do something different. So we all get, moving on to the next section is training. We get a lot of training on all the things that we do. I like the FAST program because it encourages a recurrent training, kind of like what you and I do professionally, and rather than just going for or the wings program, I should say. And everybody here, we're preaching to the choir because they're here, they're watching, they're wanting to learn. You guys, I commend you for being here. But recurrent training, ongoing training over a period of time really does help. One thing I recommend, and you'll have a lot of fun with it as well, upset prevention and recovery training, UPRT, is a structured program that teaches pilots to recognize the conditions that can lead to an aircraft upset. It can prevent the upset. You learn how to do these, how to fly the airplane so as to prevent the upset. And if possible, if not, like maybe you hit a wake, maybe it's something you didn't anticipate. It teaches you to safely recover from a pretty bad upset. You go through several different kinds. And an upset generally means that the airplane has unintentionally gone outside its normal flight envelope, gone outside the limits of where you want it to be. It's in an uncommanded state, so to speak. The altitude, airspeed, angle of attack is approaching or is in a loss of control scenario. So this kind of training helps you get past that. A lot of flight departments will send their pilots to that. The airline, we do a certain degree of it. The overall purpose is to reduce loss of control in flight, LOC. That's a leading cause of fatal accidents worldwide. Its primary emphasis is on prevention, building the pilot's situational awareness. So when you recognize when an airplane loses control, you're more able to prevent it. So these recognition skills are built up, the decision making, so that the upset never really fully develops. But then this training also provides, again, the correct recovery techniques if it does. So you're comfortable and not afraid and intimidated by something like that happening. The U.S. government uses several companies in their contracting abilities. And these are just three that are listed. If you were to look for what the government allows their employees, like the highway patrol or the forestry service or whoever, they have pilots, they send their pilots to one of these schools to receive that upset and recovery training. If you're going to go do your spin training, you have a spin endorsement, John?
I do.
Well, yeah, because you're a CFI. You ever go
Yeah.
do spin since you got that?
I have not. And it's actually one of those things I wish I could do a little bit more. Right before I got mine, the school that I went to was using extra 300s for spin training.
Ugh, that's a good
And then I came up for spin training and it was down for maintenance. So I got to do it in a very fun 172. So
Oh, yeah, those are hard to get to spin.
right. So I always wished I had done it maybe a week sooner and could have gotten into the extras. So an next opportunity to get into a real aerobatic plane and try my hand at some of that stuff, I'd love to.
Yeah, these companies, and they're all over the country. You don't have to choose one of these, but I know Patty Wagstaff uses the extra for her training. CP Aviation uses Super Decathlons and Citabrias. I've been there, and my good friend Mark King teaches there. He does a fantastic job there. He's a aerobatic master instructor, and doing these things and mastering the aircraft will give you a comfort level. That I think these pilots, had they been through that kind of training, might have recognized they're approaching the limits. Pilots may not realize, if they haven't done it since they're private pilot or commercial pilot or ATP training, ATP and commercial, I think we just teach approaching the stall, right? And after Colgan accident, we have to go full stalls in the simulator. They had to modify our simulators so that we could do full stalls. So, yeah. I've taught in the Lear also. We went up and did stalls in the Lear and steep turns and up at altitude, obviously. And one new topic that we're getting a lot, really heavy focus on, is fatigue risk management. And effective, you really need to manage your fatigue, manage your sleep. I think that could have been a factor in this case. They were, they had a 3-leg day. Charter pilots generally don't get a lot of sleep because, like you said, they're constantly being rerouted, redirected. They think they're going one place at 10 a.m. Instead, they're going somewhere further away at 8 a.m. Sometimes they think they're going to be home that night, and all of a sudden they're sent back out again. So at the airline level, we get training that I love to take to the GA level about fatigue management, but managing your fatigue reduces errors, enhances safety margins, it supports the pilot's long-term health in addition to that, and your well-being. At the airline level, it's really being emphasized. They're actually saying it's worse, being tired is worse than having a drink of alcohol. And I'm not recommending you drink and fly, but fatigue is a psychological state of reduced mental or physical performance capability resulting from a loss of sleep or extended wakefulness from being awake too long or being out of your circadian phase. So international pilots crossing a lot of borders or time zones have a problem with that, but they have to control it. And we get trained now on how to deal with that, how to manage the fatigue. Something you should give a lot of consideration to. In fact, the FAA put out, and this is in the course resources as well, the fatigue in aviation that the FAA put out. Again, a little more content than we can provide here. Also, the Airplane Flying Handbook, Pilot's Handbook Aeronautical Knowledge has, in the course resources, I've taken out the sections that apply to stabilized approaches and fatigue. They are in the course resources, like the ACS also has a section on stabilized approaches. I've taken those out. They're in the course resources. So everything focuses right there. What happens when you're too tired? Being too tired affects your reaction time. You might know how to react to something, but it might take you longer to recognize something's wrong. I've seen this in myself when I'm too tired. And of course, this list of items all are affected by a lack of sleep. I've seen that happen. John, have you ever flown when you haven't had enough sleep?
Unfortunately, especially when it comes to some of the charter stuff, there's those that have and those that probably will. And I'm not advocating it, but I like to sort of give the example that fatigue can be a lot like hypoxia. You don't plan for it, and it comes on in a lot of cases very slowly to where you think you're okay. Oh, I just have one more leg. I'm not that tired. And then somewhere in the middle of that leg, next thing you know, you're, darn near incapacitated. I had a trip that it was the last day of an 8-day rotation. And I was, like you said, I wasn't actually planning on flying that day. I got called in for 3 legs. It was international. I mean, if you consider Canada international, we were going to Toronto. So not that difficult of a flight, but we had to go somewhere first and then go to Toronto and then come home. And it was another sort of early morning, long day. And the nice thing that we had in that environment is it was a crew. And I was honest with my co-pilot and I said, look, I'm on my last day. I didn't get a lot of sleep. I'm tired. I'm safe, but I'm tired. And I said, I think the best thing for me to do is fly the first leg and I'll let you have, the next 2. And he said, okay. And so we divvied it up. And I just said, if you see anything, please let me know. Or if you have any concerns, we'll talk about those as well. Well, we got to the last leg of those 3 and that's when it hit me. And it was as if, again, that hypoxia creeped in. Next thing you know, I'm missing radio calls. I'm struggling to read back instructions. And I just looked at him and said, this is, I'm going to need you to watch me. And that's really easy for us to say in a multi-crew environment. If you're a GA pilot flying a 172 or a small aircraft and you're by yourself, that's when it gets really dangerous. So, make sure that you find a way to try to be at least as honest with yourself as possible, because you may not have that kind of security in a backup.
It's a good point. And if you are too tired, don't fly. You know, I ask when I teach classes in person, I'll ask everybody, hey, if you only got 4 hours sleep in the last 2 nights, should you fly your family on a cross-country trip today? And everybody says no. Well, obviously not. No. But put yourself, that's in a classroom setting. Everybody will say no in a classroom setting. But you get out to the airport in the hangar, you get your family sitting there waiting to go, and you've had very little sleep. You were up the night before because of like last minute things that you think about. We got to plan this, look at that, because you are a good planner, because you worry about everything. And just like Lindbergh was up the night before thinking of every contingency, got no sleep before his 9,000-hour flight across the Atlantic.
Right.
And he was fatigued as well. And his book talks greatly about how he really fought that off. But when you're out there in the real world, out there at the airplane, be honest with yourself. Like, you might feel good right now, like, oh, you talk yourself into it. They want to go, they'll kill me if we don't go, and I'm feeling pretty good. I think I got this. Well, that you might feel real good right now, but again, you're going to be slower at responding. You're going to miss radio calls, like you said. And if you're flying with someone else, or you recognize someone blinking slowly, or even see you're blinking slowly, that's how you recognize someone is extra tired. Just watch that. You'll see. And you've probably seen it in yourself when you're really tired. You blink slowly and you talk slower and you think slower. You takes longer to answer a question and everything. I will say this because I'm open about it with other people, but I have sleep apnea and I have to use a CPAP machine. And I didn't know how tired I was until I found out. When I put that machine on, and the next day I felt like I was a teenager again. And I was feeling every day of my life after you fly a red eye, international red eye home or something, the next day. And I'm just like groggy, I'm out of it. But now I put that machine on, and the FAA has gotten very friendly about it. If anybody has or thinks or is curious about that, contact me, reach out through the website. I'm happy to talk about, mentor anybody about that, because getting it fixed is important. So
I think there's two really important points, and I'll make them quickly because I know we're running a little bit short on time.
Sure.
But our mutual friend and mentor of mine, Bob Mader, if anybody has listened to me speak before, podcast or NAFI or otherwise, my favorite quote in the world comes from Bob, and his thing is, show me in the pilot's operating handbook where the emergency takeoff checklist is. So it doesn't matter if you're fatigued. It doesn't matter if there's weather. There is no important thing enough for you to take off when you are not feeling that it's the right thing to do. And then the second point is, for those of us that are Part 91, corporate, 135 charter, or 121 airlines, there is a fatigue rule there for a reason. If all we have to do is say we're fatigued and the day goes away. Now you have to be serious about it, and you can't, use it ad nauseum, but that protection is there for pilots where there is no repercussions. If you are fatigued, you say those words and your day disappears. So don't forget that.
Yeah, we in the 121 world also have that, and I take it to GA as well. If we drop the F-bomb, fatigue, it's an all stop. You're off the trip. It's done. You don't even have to say why. You're not asked about it. It's a no questions thing. And that's how it should be, because you shouldn't be afraid to declare yourself fatigued, get off the trip. That's how it is with, of course, it's easier for us. We have reserve pilots who they can call right away, and so that makes it easier for us than charter and 91 world. Sometimes you don't have backup pilots, but it is what it is. I think most of the time your passengers will be fine if you say, you know what, I'm just too tired. I don't want to hurt you today. And and Bob has a lot of great sayings. He's full of ones like that. We need to have him on the show and have him spit some of those out. All right. Well, we beat that to death. It's probably putting some of you to sleep. So last thing I want to talk about is the 2 speeds concept. You'll often hear me say it. I say 2 speeds all the time. I see people at Oshkosh and they see me walking by and they go, hey, 2 speeds. And that is because I brief my students, I brief other pilots, I give everybody a flight review. I talk about this, and my co-pilots at work, I give them the briefing that I have one of 2 speeds. We're going to choose one of 2 speeds at which to make this flight. 1, slow, methodical, deliberate, doing things on purpose in a thought out, organized fashion. Or the other speed, screw up. meaning hasty, rushing into things, not thinking things out, and being in a hurry because someone's pressuring you. We choose one of these two speeds to operate, and I choose number 1. And I tell my co-pilots, if you see me compelled to operate at speed number 2, that's where 90% of the accidents we're seeing, including this one that we're looking at today, the pilots feel compelled to hurry. They're doing this thing in a hurry. You've got plenty of time. What is going to happen if you have to wait a little bit longer? Study a little bit longer, review the approach longer, go around and come back, take delay vectors because you're not familiar with this. A lot of things you can do, but hurrying does a lot of things. It compresses your checklist. Everything's packed in and compressed. It increases the amount of mistakes you make. Again, look at all the accidents. Most of them have some component of the pilot rushing or being compelled to comply with ATC. Again, it's the pilot to responsibility to stop that from happening. It reduces your time to cross-check and back things up. Rushing fosters mistakes, omissions, and weak monitoring abilities. So you got to take that rushing out of the equation. But as pilots, we are often compelled to do it. We often do feel pressured. One thing they teach us out the airline is about task saturation. And this goes along with my 2 speeds lesson, that task saturation is basically how many tasks you have to do over a certain amount of time. The more tasks or less time causes task saturation, which is when you have too many tasks and not enough time. You're saturated. We usually have more control over time than we have over the tasks that we have to accomplish. We usually have to do all the tasks. So what are our tools? Well, still your ego, first of all. Don't get compelled to be in this "I got this" attitude. You mentioned that earlier. Like, we are problem solvers. We try to accomplish it because somewhere deep down, even though we won't admit it, we feel like if we have to slow down, go around, make a lap, that we've failed, that we didn't accomplish our mission. The other thing is, if you're on the ground, you got a set of brakes. Use them, park them, figure out what you're going to do. Like you said, and Bob said, takeoffs are optional. And then delay vectors. If you're not ready for an approach, you're feeling a little bit funny and not prepared, say, hey, I need a delay vectors. ATC will do that when you ask for it. So you need to manage your workload. The time is where we are able to control. We have control over the time. So when you feel rushed, that's where it's time to pull on the reins. And like I said, I feel compelled sometimes. I've had first officers stop me and say, hey, you're rushing right now. Like, you're right. Why are we so wired to hurry, to comply like that? When they say take off without delay, it should be every time, unable. But no, we're like, okay, we got this. Let's go. And I'm going to speed up around the corner and take off. Why do we do that?
It's hard to say no. I think that's the biggest thing. We want to complete the mission. It's the age-old story for any pilot. And sometimes knowing that it might take a little bit longer, or we're not ready, or we shouldn't do it, those are the hardest things in the world to actually make the choice of. Yeah. But they're also sometimes the best decisions we ever make.
Yeah, exactly. And then you look back at those and say, okay, that was a good choice. But oftentimes people aren't alive enough to look back and say that was a bad choice. So, all right, let's look at some of the technology that we were referring to earlier that's in place that we can take a look at. And really, we don't have a whole lot tonight, but you mentioned ForeFlight. And this is just a pre-flight preparation and ForeFlight that we can do looking at airports. I just did a quick screenshot of me going to get the information that pilots post about airports, and that it didn't start. Let me start this again. And that the airport posts. The airport manager will, like what's in the AFD will be there, and what pilots post. So basically go into ForeFlight, pull up your airport that you want to look at in the airports tab, and then click on comments. And in there you've got comments and you've got remarks. The remarks are published by the airport. The comments are published by users. And note that there's an AI summary at the top. It says, hey, this is what pilots are saying. And it's actually pretty accurate. Like, if there's a lot of pilots saying ATC always leaves you high, well, it's going to be in the AI part of it, because it picks up on the fact that a lot of pilots are saying the same thing. So that's where you look at it in ForeFlight. That's a very handy tool. Also, when you look at the, like Teterboro, we look at the airport facility directory entry. I always look at this for every airport I go to the first time I go there. Some airports say, yeah, don't enter on the 45. It's too dangerous. Some airports say no straight ins. There's a lot of things that can be here specific to the airport you're going to. And I think we as pilots, after we get our private, we stop looking at this. It's very interesting. So in ForeFlight, go to the info tab, go down, click on AFD, and that's the airport facility directory entry in the chart supplement for that airport. You'll notice that on this one, it actually says note, and what does it say? Note, see special notes, arrival alert. Actually, I could have zoomed in. There it is. So where does that take you? When you see that as a pilot, where do you go? See special notices, arrival alert. Where are the special notices? You know,
That's a great question.
Yeah, exactly. Most people don't know. I didn't know for a while. I had to look it up. Yes, it's the book that we used to always carry around with us. Used to be formerly known as the Airport Facility Directory. Now it's called the Chart Supplement. It contains the AFD, but I go to the search bar in there. I pull it up basically in the Documents tab, search for it, and then go into the search, and you can see there's a section on the special notices, and they're all in there. And you can also, once you find them, if it's an airport you go to a lot, you can save a bookmark. And I've saved these bookmarks for Teterboro. You can make highlight squares around things that are important so that when you go back there, they catch your attention. You can go to foreflightworkshops.com for a comprehensive review of this. We've done, I've done probably about 18 seminars about ForeFlight in those ForeFlight workshops. And again, there's a link to that in the resources, so we don't need to belabor that. FlightAware is a good one. You can go there and see, hey, what's going on at this airport? Which way are they landing right now? I went and checked many times. I was hoping to get the circle to land going on, but it wasn't. It's a rare occasion, you say, right?
It is. It doesn't happen all that often. They usually, if they can get you to land on 6, they try. So it's a roll of the dice on those particular days, whether they're going to make you land with a crosswind or whether they're going to actually have you circle to 1.
Yeah. So you got winds 330 at 30 knots. You're probably going to say, I'd rather land on 1.
Yeah.
And that's when they're going to give you that circle clearance, right?
That's correct.
Okay. You told me about an interesting website, and I'd never heard of it before, code7700.com. While I was playing around with this website, there's a lot of neat stuff on there. How do you use it?
Yeah, it's a great site. I actually learned it from the former chief pilot of the company I used to work for. He was a training captain, and I was stressing out about another circle, the one out of Chicago Executive, PWK. And he brought up, well, hey, have you ever heard of this website? And it's kind of cool because they'll actually go into details in some cases on some of the math, if you even care to understand it, of how the circle works and how it's built and stuff like that. But one of the nice things you'll see, and Teterboro being one of the specific airports in here, is they not just outline what circles are traditionally used at that airport, but then they'll actually walk you through the procedures. So, again, knowing we don't have too much time to go through all of it, the major point that they have is that you're going to circle at Torby, and then your goal is to basically stay just outside of MetLife Stadium, which is something that even I can remember. Yeah. So I don't have to remember every single step of the circle, but I know that if I keep MetLife to my left, I know that I'm actually kind of right on profile for what I should be doing. And then all I have to do is make sure I do a stabilized descent in. So, again, from a pre-flight knowledge leading up to a circle that maybe you haven't done before, a website like this can walk you through it and put you in a comfortable place.
Well, and it might also tell you that exists there where you may not have even thought about it the first time you're going somewhere. They might say this happens a lot.
Exactly.
So I think that's great. And we don't have time to go through the whole thing, but play around on that website. The link also is in the resources, and I think you'll find that a useful tool for going somewhere you've never been before. Mm-hmm. Well, because we're running late, I wasn't going to talk about charted visual approaches, procedures, because most people don't have it. I'm just going to go over it real quick. Just know that this exists in the professional world for a company that will spend the money on it. This is a charted visual procedure, and this is the one for Teterboro for actually doing an RNAV approach. It's a visual approach. You can see it's private. You have to pay extra for this, of course. But this is the procedure going to runway 1, and you can program this into your FMS. It's actually pre-programmed. You just pull it up, and this is the route the airplane's going to fly. Notice the MetLife Stadium's right there. But that's what the visual approach should have looked like into Teterboro. So in the event, I know that we're running behind. So let's jump to the next section, the games, the trivia game we've got. Some of this really doesn't apply, but it's a lot of fun. Again, I want to thank the first Schiff. This family is full of Schiff. I can tell you that. There's 3 of us that fly. And he wrote this one. It's 1,000 Things You Thought You Knew About Aviation. And it has a lot of great trivia quizzes. So the first person to fly an airplane across the Atlantic Ocean was who? And you're probably thinking, he wouldn't be asking a question that easy, would he? But there are 4 choices. Albert Reed, John Alcock, Charles Lindbergh. Never heard of him. Who's that? And then Charles Nungesser. That sounds like a dummy answer there, doesn't it? Nungesser. I got to ask that if he made that name up. D is not the answer, I'll tell you that. So who did it? First person to fly an airplane across the Atlantic Ocean. I know we're compelled to say Charles Lindbergh, but it wasn't him. It was Albert C. Reed. In 1919, he flew an 84-knot Curtiss NC-4 flying boat from Newfoundland to Lisbon across via the Azores. And I really wanted to look into this some more and find out more about this story before tonight's program, but I didn't have a chance. So you'll have to do that yourself. Question 2. With what kind of de-icing equipment was Douglas Wrongway Corrigan's Curtis Robin equipped during his famous misadventure across the Atlantic Ocean in 1938? That's another story you might want to look at if you've never heard of Wrongway Corrigan or what that story is about. Check that out. It's kind of cool. So what was his de-icing equipment in the Curtis Robin? Was it alcohol? Fire to heat the wing? Was it a stick? Or was it bleed air, exhaust air from the engine to heat the wing? Do you know, John? I know you know because you can see the next slide.
Yeah.
So what did he have? You got to have the anti-icing equipment to fly into known icing conditions, and he had it. He had a stick. The airplane was equipped with an 8-foot-long stick. Corrigan would stick it out the window to scrape ice off the wings as it accumulated during flight. And yes, I used AI to create this image, and I know you want me to zoom in on it so you can see it. I said to AI, create me an image of somebody flying an airplane and using a stick. Generally, you don't stick out of the engine compartment, but I think it's quite comical to see what AI comes up with.
If only he had used alcohol and the stick to light it on fire and then get the ice off.
Question 3, more technical rather than trivia, but 2 identical airplanes are climbing. The airplanes are identical. They weigh the same at the same exact density altitude. One is within a low pressure system and the other is within a high pressure system. Which airplane has the best climb performance? So one of them has the altimeter set to 30.40. The other one has it set to 29.75. Which one is actually going to get a better rate of climb? And I should have put neither as one of the choices here, but I didn't. It's one of the 2. One of those 2 aircraft will get a better rate of climb. Anybody? I see the answers coming in. I see both answers coming in. Yep. Well, guess what? The aircraft climbing in the low has the best climb performance because the air within a high is sinking. That's what makes the high pressure. The air within a low is rising. That's what makes the lower pressure, or part of what makes it. And an airplane obviously climbs better in rising air than it does in subsiding or sinking air. So file that away if you want a choice of where you're going to do a best rate of climb contest. Question 4. When a pilot flies into the region of reverse command, this is actually, I think, that subject is on an FAA written test, so it's not a total trivia. What does that mean? A, the ailerons will work backwards? Boy, that would suck. You ever see the videos of a guy trying to ride a bicycle and the handlebars are rigged to move the wheel the opposite direction?
No.
Oh my gosh, it's hilarious. It took him 2 weeks to learn how to ride that bike. You cannot do it in one flight. If your ailerons are misrigged and you're trying to outthink it, you're likely not to be able to. It's
Yeah.
tough. B, more power is required to fly more slowly. C, there will be a high frequency buffet. Or D, the aircraft will stall. And so for those listening to the podcast, I'll read it again. When a pilot flies into the region of reversed command, A, the ailerons will work backwards. B, more power is required to fly more slowly. C, there will be a high frequency buffet. Or D, the aircraft will stall. The answer is B, more power is required to fly more slowly. The region of reverse command is the formal name given to that mode of flight where the airplane is flying behind the power curve. Additional power is required to maintain altitude as airspeed decreases. And if you've seen this chart, it's that yellow area that I've highlighted where you're behind the power curve. The power is the bottom curve. You see, the slower you go along that bottom line, the more power is required to fly that speed. And if you don't believe that, ask your instructor to demonstrate it because it's worth seeing. All right, our last question. To maximize gliding distance while gliding with a tailwind, the glider pilots watching this, they already know this. A pilot should use the glide speed published in the POH, an airspeed that is greater than the published glide speed, an airspeed that is less than the published glide speed, or full nose up trim to maximize the gliding distance while gliding with a tailwind. What should you do? Glide faster than published speed, slower than published speed, or exactly at the published speed, or full nose up trim. I've taught that full nose up trim is a good way to find best glide speed in an airplane if you don't know it, in a lot of light singles, not all airplanes. But the answer for this one is C. Reducing airspeed reduces sink rate, which causes the airplane to stay in the air longer. And this increases the time during which the tailwind can assist the pilot in extending his glide range or her glide range. The amount of airspeed reduction depends on wind speed. If you have a really long tailwind, slow down, benefit from that wind a little bit longer. Conversely, if you have a headwind, you want to go a little bit faster than glide speed so that you reduce the amount of time you're being affected by that headwind. Anyway, this flight, the accident flight, was caused by, I think, a big lack of planning. And as we know by Benjamin Franklin, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. I think that's an outstanding quote. Now remember, next year, starting next month, we are going to have some changes. Thank you for helping make 2025 a great year for the Shift Show. Be sure to join us next year for the new and improved Shift Show 2.0. We will step up the game portion of this program with points and monthly prizes. We'll keep track of your score and present our top tier winners with the grand prize at Oshkosh in July during a live Shift Show. Most importantly, we'll be adding Wings flight credits to the knowledge credits that you already receive for watching this program. And with both, you can check off your flight review just by participating in the Shift Show. And flight activities will be designed and tailored to align with the accidents that we're reviewing and to help you learn how to avoid such accidents. So there's a great lesson, great way to help learn not to have, repeat an accident that's already happened. But we're going to align those together. It's going to be fantastic. The faster you answer a question correctly, the more points you'll get. John, I really want to thank you for joining us. You've had a lot of great contributions to this, even though I know I tend to hog the talking time. I appreciate that. I probably could let you talk the whole time and everybody would have got more out of that. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to being a guest on the Com Cockpit podcast. I encourage everybody to check it out. It's an aspect of flying that is very important, and I think that is very underrated. And please check it out. I think you'll get a lot out of it. Check out my monthly column, CFI Care. Again, links to all of these things are on my website, captainschiff.com. They're also in the course resources. Next month, we have Tammy Barlett. And John said she was the first guest on his podcast, and that was total coincidence. But she's a pilot, the military pilot, founder and CEO of Mental Performance Coach, and she'll be on our program on January 8th at 7 p.m. Central Time. Again, the second Thursday in January. Join us here on the SchiffShow.tv. Very important. Remember, you want to get your wings credit, but remember, try to wait till later tonight or tomorrow. Take the wings credit quiz, but the FAA safety website, like I said, it really does bog down after our show, and people complain, and I get hundreds of emails. So to avoid that, I'm encouraging you to do it later. I understand that the FAA is making improvements to fix this issue, and hopefully that happens soon. So again, tonight, a special thank you to John Niehaus for joining us. I appreciate that. Thank you, John. Avemco for sponsoring it, Aeronautical Proficiency Training for producing it, the Wings Industry Network for helping make the Wings program easier. And they're going to be instrumental in coordinating the flight credit part of this next year. And again, FAA Safety Team for allowing us to use their platform and give Wings credit. But most importantly, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you being here. And without you, there'd be no point in our program. Thank you, everybody. I will say again, 2 speeds, and good night.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.